We're doing measuring progress with assessments. And the things we'll be covering today are what is an assessment, how assessments are used in the TMS, what an assessment looks like if you're a student, tips and tricks for writing assessments, then how to create an assessment and get it accessible to your student, and then viewing the results on assessments. So what is an assessment? Assessments refer to tools educators use to evaluate, measure, and report on educational needs, learning progress, or skill acquisition of students. So an assessment is a tool that allows us to take a look at how much a student currently understands in a topic. We can use assessments to measure the progress they have made on a topic, and you can use assessments to evaluate skills a student needs to learn or their competency level of that skill. So if you're looking at evaluating educational needs, you may want to evaluate a student to see if they're ready to take a course. It may be you want to make sure that students that are at the right level of understanding to be able to take the course. If they're too slow or don't have the skills, they may slow down a class. If they are too advanced, they may be bored with the class. And in any of those situations, your whole class may become frustrated. You may want to measure learning progress. You might want to know where they are at the beginning of the class and contrast that with what skills they've acquired when that course is finished. You could also set up assessments following a segment in a course to measure how much their learning is progressing. So you can intersperse them at the end of topics. And you also may need to report back. You know, we've all gotten report cards. And you may have to report back to an employer or a program that the student is competent in the subject matter on the course, and you can use an assessment to do that as well. So the big picture, looking at an assessment and getting it to the student, you are going to design and write your assessment, or delegate that to someone else, and then come into the TMS and actually input that assessment into the TMS. After it has been created, we're going to add the assessment to the course as an activity. And then it gets put into the student's hands if they're taking a class or self-paced learning, and they are able to take that assessment. You, as an administrator, can view the assessment results. Students, if the assessment is opened up to review, are also able to review the results. So let's go out and see what an assessment looks like. And now we should be looking at my student who is going to come in and take an assessment from their enrollment. So we're going to scroll on down and skip other activities and just jump to the assessment. So I'm going to launch the assessment. You can see here that it's set to be required and the status is it hasn't started yet. And when I take my assessment, this is what it looks like. And I'll go and answer some questions correctly and some incorrectly. So you can see the difference between a correct and incorrect answer. And we'll get that one incorrect. And when I submit it, I'll have to close this window that was open, but my assessment activity has now changed. And you can see I now have a score on my assessment and it's marked complete. This has been opened up for retakes and review. If it were completed and neither of those options were available, that would just be, there'd be no launch button here anymore at all. If they do choose to retake the assessment, it will display their highest score attained out here for them. If I go back and as a student, I'm reviewing my assessment, I'll be able to see my score, what class I was in, and then down here I can see which answers I marked with check marks or the radio buttons, and I can see which answer was correct by it's bold and underlined in green. And if I marked an incorrect answer, it shows with a red underline. So these were all correct. One was correct, one was wrong, and I missed one of the correct ones. And then down here, I got it right, and I got this one wrong. So you'll also notice that you can, I now have little comments, basically answer explanations under each question. And you can choose to input these or not. And it gives you a chance to explain why this is the correct, why the answer that is correct, and perhaps even why the incorrect answers are incorrect. And I also have this little information button. And when I click on that, it's going to pull me out to a website that is a resource for me to learn more about that topic. So how I can learn more about the color black. So that is what a student does and can see and what our assessments look like. Let's take a look at creating an assessment. I need to change my screen again. So the first thing we're going to talk about in creating an assessment is some best practices that our instructional design department has shared with me. They do this all day, all the time, not only writing assessments, but writing courses, and are available to you if you would like to work with them. So our first best practice is that you would write your questions to cover critical and important course objectives. By that we mean, instead of just saying, hey, the topic that we had in chapter 2, I'm just going to make sure that I cover some of the information, you actually want to go back to chapter 2 or module 2 and look at what the course objectives were, what are the skills that they were trying to attain, and write questions based on those. And then you can go back and validate your questions by mapping them back to the course objectives. You're meeting those specific, important objectives rather than just covering some general ideas. Our second best practice is each question should contain one idea and one answer. Multiple concepts in a question could be confusing to the reader. Also, the answer needs to be 100% correct, and distractors should be incorrect. Keeping the question and the answer simple avoids issues with half correct answers. So I have a couple of examples here, and we want to make sure that we're on point with the question containing one idea and the answer being totally correct or the distractors, the incorrect answers being completely incorrect. So you want to make a right turn at an upcoming intersection, you should slow down and move toward the left side of your lane, avoid driving in the bicycle lane, or signal 100 feet before turning. So those are all plausible things, and they are, and signaling is our correct answer. So if you look at our incorrect example, we kind of muddle things up. You want to make a right turn at an upcoming intersection. When you approach the intersection, the signal turns yellow. You should signal 100 feet before turning and come to a complete stop. Move toward the left side of your lane to avoid driving in the bicycle lane. Signal 100 feet before turning and proceed if it's safe. That can get too many things going on in both the question and the answer, and it can be confusing for your assessment takers. Okay, number 3 best practice is make each question ask something specific. Vague questions result in a high percentage of bad results in your reporting. We have an example of this. Lanes of traffic moving in opposite directions are divided by yellow lines, white lines, red lines, or black lines. If I do this a little too vaguely and I'm not specific about what I'm looking for, I might have written the question that lanes of traffic are divided by yellow lines, white lines, red lines, black lines. So at this point, your responder might be confused because if traffic's moving in the same direction, they're divided by white lines. If they're moving in opposite directions, they're divided by yellow lines. So it isn't specific enough for them to get the right answer consistently. Number 4 on best practices. For multiple choice questions, include 1 correct answer and 2 to 3 distractors. You want to not have so many options that it is confusing, and not too few either, because then it might make it too simple to find the right answer. Try to keep it to one correct answer to 2 or 3 distractors. When you're creating an assessment and you're using both multiple choice with one correct answer or multiple choice with multiple correct answers, it's important to make it clear that they're looking for one correct answer, so that they're not trying to find whether there are multiple answers for that question. So you might put in wording like select the correct answer for them so that they know they're only looking for one. And for multiple select answers, where you have multiple correct choices, we suggest you use no more than 3 correct answers and a total of 5 options. Then if you're keeping your total of options to 5 and you have 2 correct answers, you would have 3 distractors. If you have 3 correct answers, you would have 2 distractors. You also want to, at the end of the question, let them know, again, cue them that they're looking for multiple correct answers. You might say, select the 3 correct answers or select all that apply. Number 6, we suggest you don't use all of the above questions. They can be seen as trick questions, and they can also stand out as the obvious answer to the question. Moving on to 7. Do not use questions that ask the user to select what is not applicable in a list. Again, it can be seen as a trick question, and it's confusing for a reader if they haven't read the question carefully enough. So you may want to change that to a positive by saying something like, which of the following apply, rather than which of the following don't apply. And number 8, strive to make all response options parallel to start with a verb or a noun consistently and approximately the same length. Having one response much shorter or longer than others often gives away the answer. And keeping a verb as the first word or a noun as the first word gives consistency in the sentence structure, and it helps to let them evaluate more quickly the options they have for the answer. So I have a couple of examples here. The correct one would be, when parking your vehicle parallel to the curb on a level street, your front wheels must be turned toward the street. Your wheels must be within 18 inches of the curb, and one of your rear wheels must touch the curb. And an incorrect way to put this would be using the same question, when parking your vehicle parallel to the curb on a level street, and you'll notice I start some with a verb and some with not a verb. And one of my answers is much longer than the other. So turn your front wheels toward the street. Your wheels, my subject just changed. Didn't change. Your wheels must be within 18 inches of the curb in order to not encumber the traffic lane. And the last one being, one of your rear wheels must touch the curb. So it's much better to format them so they're equal in length and all starting with either a noun or a verb. Number 9, distractors, those incorrect answers, should be plausible to the reader who does not have the skill being measured, but they should be unquestionably incorrect to a reader who does have that skill. Distractors need to be on topic and refer to the subject matter at hand and be undeniably incorrect. Our correct formatted question is, when driving in fog, you should use your one correct answer: fog lights, high beams, low beams. So it should be low beams because not everybody necessarily has fog lights. And when incorrect, and you always have to have your low beams on, when driving in fog, you should use your GPS, windshield wipers, or low beams. So I might actually use my GPS or windshield wipers, but they're not really on the same topic and comparable to one another as the top question is. So number 10, whenever possible, provide specific feedback for a question, why a question is correct or incorrect. Assessment can be used as a secondary source of learning and knowledge gain. So it can be an educational instrument as well, not just an evaluation. And we have that ability in our assessments. We saw that with our student earlier. She could go back and see an explanation for each answer, and also look at resources through the internet because they were input into the assessment. So number 11, our final one, is a little longer than the others. Bear with me. Language should not be a barrier to comprehending a question. So we really want to focus when we're creating these on testing the skill or evaluating what they do know about the topic. And we don't want language to ever become a distraction to them in that or confusion. And so you want your terms to be very, very clear for the user. And we don't want to get them focused on something other than the test. So we want to avoid using absolute terms like always, none, only. If you do use absolute terms, your test takers, assessment takers might be focused on exceptions to the absolute. Well, what if? So you said it always happens when the sky is cloudy, but what if it's foggy? Or what if what if it's partially cloudy? So they might what if the question to death and miss the point of it. Use wording to let responders discriminate between the various options by using the criteria in the question. We want the question to be well enough and the options to be well enough worded so that you don't have to actually say always, none, only in those words. And you phrase a question properly, design it so it has one correct answer. You don't need these always, none, and only. So for instance, my correct example is driving more slowly than other traffic can block traffic, is good defensive driving, is safer than driving faster than other traffic. But if you say always driving more slowly than other traffic, it kind of confuses the question a bit. So you want to keep it as clear as possible so it focuses on the answer that you're looking for. And if they know that answer. Continuation of our number 11, language should not be a barrier to comprehending a question. We want to avoid using contractions. Instead, you should be spelling out both words to draw attention to the negation in a question. So instead of saying don't, do not, actually, and won't, will not. And that helps especially not only to emphasize the negation that might be in there, but also it helps with English second language. So if you're not wanting to test someone's English skills, you want to, and contractions can be really difficult for people who are using English as a second language, so help them out by taking out your contractions. The last one is we want to avoid using would and could. Would and could indicate an action that would happen if certain circumstances were met. So again, they can be confusing because you enter that question of what if in there. Instead, you want to use can and will. Can reflects ability, will describes an action expected to take place in the future. So they're much more direct, active, going to take place. Example of this would be to avoid last-minute moves, you can look down the road to where your vehicle will be in about 15 seconds. An incorrect way to word that would be to avoid last-minute moves, you could look down the road to where your vehicle would be in about so many seconds. It's just much more clear and active of this is what I am doing as opposed to this is what I might do. So let's go back and look at creating an assessment. You should be seeing my site administration page, and I'm in here as an operations manager right now, if I can get control of my mouse. There it is. So if you're on site administration, you're going to find that assessments tile. You can move it around to be somewhere where it's more accessible to you. And you're going to click on that create assessment link. So people get to this page and sometimes they're a bit confused because it doesn't really look like you can create an assessment from here. And I'm completely with you on that. So what you have to do is actually put in a name and create and hit save. And then it creates a record or a container. And within that container, we're going to design the assessment. So if I hit sample assessment and then I hit save, It actually now gives me more options over here. I can edit, design, delete, or search. So I'm going to go into one that I've actually created already. If you hit edit here, it will let you come back to change the name, add a description, disable it, or change the organization. If you come into design, it actually has places where you can add your question and design your questions. So if I hit add question, I would have the ability to create a brand new question. I'm going to come over here and edit my assessment. And I have two different question types that are available on the assessment. I have the ability to create a question that is multiple choice with a single correct answer, or multiple choice with multiple correct answers. So I choose that first, then I input my text for my question. If I want to add a URL, I'll put in the URL here for them to access. Remember, when you're adding the URL, this is available to the student when they're taking the assessment as well as when they're reviewing it. It could give them the right answer, so that's may not be something you want to do right there. And you can add your answer explanation, and you might go through your distractors and say why those were incorrect. Down here, I'm going to come to the label section, and I'm going to click add, and that's going to allow me to input another label. I can put in whatever I want for this. And from here, I can also designate which is the correct answer by inputting the checkbox. And if I don't like the answer or option I put in, I can delete it again. So I'm going to cancel that. You can also move questions. So if you click on move, it's going to give you options of where you can move it. I can move the question here or cancel the move. I can cancel the move, or I can move the question down over here. So I have the different options as to where I would move it, and I just click on that and it would move that question for me. And then you can delete a question as well. Once you have input your information, that's available over here as a link. And we can preview our assessment and see what it looks like, what it's going to look like when the student takes it. Here you can come in and just do your editorial review and check your links, check that everything's in the order you want it in, and see all those things. If I actually do hit the questions, I can see that some are required answers. It doesn't matter, but you can hit submit, and it says, yeah, if you were taking an assessment, it would have been submitted now. Hit OK and come out of there. So once I have this assessment in place, I'm going to add it to a course. And it needs to be in a course as an activity so that when an enrollment or course assignment is opened, it's available to your student. So you go to your course profile and you click on Edit. From here, I'm going to go to the Activities tab, and I'm going to add an assessment. And I'm going to look for that color assessment because everybody should know all about color theory, and click OK. So now that I've added it, I can do a few things. So for instance, on the lab, I have a duration of 8 hours. I can manually input my duration for my assessment. I'll say it's 7 minutes. And a bit of the availability here, you want to leave it for everyone. The only other selection is instructors only. And with everyone, your students will see it. With instructors only, they would not. You can set whether or not it's required for course completion. This does a few things. For instance, their progress bar will show on their enrollment or course assignment will show a percentage of completion for the course. On this one, it would be 50% if they take the assessment. You can determine whether or not it's available instructor-led and or self-paced by checking or unchecking those boxes. And down here, you can allow retakes or allow review. So you have control over whether or not they can retake it or review the assessment once it's finished. If you don't allow review, they can see the score on that activity when it's shown. Assigned to students manually, if you check this, no one sees the activity until it is assigned directly to a student. Well, the instructor sees it. The students will not see anything until that is assigned to them. If it's assigned to Jane's student, she sees it, and if it's not assigned to Susan's student, she does not see that activity at all. So the instructor would assign those manually in a class. Click on Save, And now I have an assessment added into my course, which I would make a class or a course assignment from. So finally, the last piece we're going to take a look at is how to review assessments. And we saw that with a student earlier. And now we can take a look at my Find Assessment Responses option as an administrator. I can see everyone who has taken this assessment. I can add different filters, so I can look for specific, I may have trouble with that word today, specific person, or I can enter a class and see everyone in that class and what they took for the assessment and how their responses were. I can see here who it is, what assessment it was, what the scores were for those students, and then what class it was here that they actually took that with. And if it was taken from a course assignment, I would see the course assignment name here as well, because it could be, you can attach assessments to multiple courses. Then when I go into details, I see the same thing the student did. And I see, the name of the assessment, the score. I can look at the enrollment from here. I can look at information on the event, on when it took place, and who the instructor was. And then again, I can see the correct answer, which answers the student marked, and the incorrect answers as well. So that is what I was going to show you today about assessments. Thank you so much for being here today and attending our seminar, our webinar. I hope you enjoyed it.